The chamber buzzed with the low roar of anticipation, every seat filled, every camera locked in place. Flashes lit the room like bursts of lightning, capturing faces braced for battle. Then, silence. Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, her voice cutting through the air with razor clarity. "Let's take a look at your bank records." Gasps rippled, sharp as breaking glass. Pam Bondi stiffened, her polished confidence faltering as eyes darted toward her. The tension thickened, heavy and unrelenting. And in that breathless moment, the crowd knew what happened in the next 5 minutes would change everything. This was no ordinary hearing. It wasn't about procedure or posturing, it was about accountability in a system too often tilted toward the powerful. The committee had convened to ask hard questions about influence, corruption, and the hidden machinery of money that fuels privilege. At the center sat Pam Bondi, a figure long accustomed to evasion and applause, now confronted by an adversary who refused to blink. Jasmine Crockett wasn't just another voice at the dais, she was carrying the weight of people who'd been dismissed, disrespected, and shut out. To them, fairness wasn't an abstract principle, it was survival. Bank records were more than columns of deposits and withdrawals, they were fingerprints of loyalty, trails of betrayal. They told stories of who profits and who pays the price. Crockett understood that exposing those numbers wasn't about humiliating one person, it was about showing a nation that corruption wears familiar faces. And as her hand hovered over the documents, the atmosphere turned electric. Because when truth touches money, careers collapse. The question was no longer if Bondi would answer, but how long she could hold her composure before the collapse began. Pam Bondi entered the national stage with the polish of a practiced performer, tailored suits, rehearsed smiles, a voice tuned to command without betraying doubt. She built her reputation as the tough prosecutor who claimed to put principle first, an image burnished by media profiles that framed her as a rising star. To many, she looked untouchable, the embodiment of confidence. But beneath that surface ran currents of contradiction that never fully disappeared. Questions lingered about decisions she made, cases she declined, donations that seemed to arrive at the most convenient moments. Critics whispered about ties to powerful allies who shielded her when scrutiny grew sharp, yet she dismissed them with practiced arrogance, brushing off accountability as if it were beneath her station. There were moments when cracks showed, when her defensiveness flared, when her composure slipped under pointed questioning. Instead of humility, she doubled down with a smirk, treating transparency like a game she had mastered. That arrogance became her armor, but also her blind spot. For years, she danced on the edge of controversy, confident that her network of connections would hold. But reputations built on deflection are fragile. And as Jasmine Crockett prepared to lay those records bare, the polished veneer Bondi had so carefully maintained began to look less like strength and more like a mask waiting to shatter. The downfall wasn't sudden, it had been written slowly, piece by piece, in choices made long before this hearing. Now, under the brightest lights, with the sharpest questions, the weight of those years was closing in. And for the first time, Pam Bondi seemed less like a symbol of authority and more like a figure standing on the edge of a very public reckoning. Jasmine Crockett's story was never one of privilege, it was one of grit. Raised in a working-class family, she learned early that dignity isn't handed down, it's fought for. Her path to law wasn't paved with connections or wealth but with late nights, relentless study, and the stubborn belief that justice should belong to everyone, not just the well-connected. She became a public defender when others chased lucrative firms, choosing to stand beside those who couldn't afford a voice. Each case hardened her resolve, each victory or loss teaching her that the system bends only when pushed by those willing to sacrifice comfort for truth. When she entered politics, it wasn't ambition that drove her but memory, the memory of families crushed by unfairness, of communities dismissed by power. Her voice carried not just her own convictions but the echoes of countless others silenced along the way. She built her reputation as fearless, sharp, unyielding when dignity was on the line. To her, debate wasn't theater, it was survival, a chance to hold the privileged accountable. And tonight, as she faced Pam Bondi across that hearing room, that lifelong fight for fairness and dignity met its ultimate test. The air thickened as Jasmine Crockett leaned into her questioning, her tone steady, her eyes locked on Bondi like a surgeon closing in on the wound. "Can you explain this transfer?" she asked, sliding a document forward with precision. Bondi let out a strained laugh, dismissing the line of inquiry as irrelevant, her polished smile slipping into something brittle. Crockett didn't flinch. "Irrelevant? These are your numbers, not mine. The exchange ignited murmurs from the gallery, aides whispering as the tension spread like wildfire. Bondi rolled her eyes, attempting to project control, but her clipped responses betrayed impatience. "You're grandstanding," she snapped, hoping to reframe the confrontation. Crockett's reply cut sharper. "No, I'm asking the questions the people deserve answers to." Each word pressed harder, narrowing Bondi's room to maneuver. The chamber vibrated with anticipation, every camera lens hungry for the moment. Composure gave way to collapse. The performance of confidence that had carried Bondi through countless appearances now looked rehearsed, hollow. Crockett's steady rhythm of inquiry was a drumbeat of inevitability, pushing her adversary step by step toward the edge. And with each question unanswered, the sense grew stronger. Bondi wasn't debating, she was unraveling. Jasmine Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. With deliberate calm, she lifted the first page of the bank records, holding it up so the cameras and committee could see. The rustle of paper in that hushed chamber sounded louder than Bondi's nervous laugh. Crockett paused, letting the silence grow heavy before she spoke. "Here," she began, her voice even, "is the transfer you just denied existed." A ripple of gasps spread through the room. Bondi shifted in her chair, tugging at her sleeve as if fabric could shield her from the glare. Another page. Another pause. Crockett placed it on the desk with surgical precision. "And here's the deposit, dated only days after your meeting with those same donors." The murmurs swelled. Bondi tried to cut in, "That's taken out of context," but her voice quivered, thin against the weight of documented truth. Crockett did not look up. She let the record answer, the evidence filling the silence that her opponent could no longer control. Bondi's eyes darted, searching for escape routes. Her replies came scattered, defensive, reaching for distractions that weren't there. But the pages kept stacking, each one a stone on the collapsing wall of her credibility. Finally, Crockett leaned back, her gaze steady and unflinching. The room froze as she delivered the line that would echo far beyond the hearing. "Your numbers don't lie, but you just did." The words hung like thunder. Gasps erupted, punctuated by a few cheers that security couldn't contain. Staffers exchanged wide-eyed looks, reporters furiously scribbled, knowing history was happening in front of them. Bondi's composure shattered. She gathered her papers with trembling hands, muttered something about further clarification, and pushed back her chair. The scrape of metal against the floor was almost drowned by the uproar in the chamber. Cameras swiveled, capturing every step as she rose, avoiding Crockett's eyes, and fled through the side exit. For a moment, the room was still, suspended in awe of what had just unfolded. Crockett sat quietly, unshaken, the pile of bank records in front of her like a monument to truth. The hearing wasn't over, but the turning point had arrived and nothing would ever be the same. Clips of Crockett's takedown spread like wildfire, looped, slowed, captioned with biting commentary. One viral edit froze on Bondi's startled expression as the words "your numbers don't lie but you just did" flashed across the screen in bold red letters. TikTok and Instagram filled with reaction videos, wide-eyed creators mouthing Crockett's line, dubbing it the political mic drop of the year. Late-night comedians seized it within hours, joking that Bondi set a new record for fastest exit under questioning. Political commentators, usually divided, found rare consensus. This, one said on a primetime broadcast, is accountability in action. Another called it the kind of moment that restores faith in public service. Celebrities chimed in, actors, musicians, even athletes tweeting praise for Crockett's fearlessness. A Grammy winner wrote simply, "That's how you speak truth to power." Meanwhile, Bondi's carefully managed image began to unravel. Headlines questioned her credibility, editorial boards demanded answers, and her allies scrambled for talking points that never landed. By contrast, Crockett's stature soared. She wasn't just the congresswoman from Texas anymore, she was the fearless truth-teller who had forced power to run. And across living rooms, comment threads, and news panels, one sentiment echoed: a single woman armed with evidence had shifted the balance, reminding America what courage looks like. When the uproar settled, Jasmine Crockett spoke with the same steady conviction that had carried her through the storm. "This isn't about me or her," she said, her voice resonant in the chamber, "it's about power and responsibility." She reminded the room and the nation watching that every leader entrusted with authority owes the people transparency, not theatrics. The confrontation with Bondi wasn't just a clash of personalities, it was a test of whether truth still mattered in a democracy often distorted by money and privilege. Crockett made it clear, no one, no matter how polished their image or how powerful their connections, is above accountability. What was revealed in those records wasn't only about dollars, it was about integrity, about the choices leaders make when they think no one is looking. And as Crockett spoke, the lesson crystallized: arrogance can posture, deception can stall, but neither can withstand the weight of dignity. The takeaway for every viewer was unmistakable. Truth has a way of cutting through the noise, and courage has a way of reminding us what justice feels like. In that moment, dignity stood taller than deception, and America was reminded that accountability is the highest form of respect for its people. Jasmine Crockett didn't just question Pam Bondi, she exposed her. What unfolded in that hearing wasn't a skirmish of words, it was a battle between truth and deception, and truth won. In a world where arrogance so often hides behind wealth and privilege, courage broke through, reminding us that accountability still matters. This moment wasn't about scandal, it was about integrity, about the power of one voice to pierce the armor of corruption. If you believe in holding leaders accountable, share this story, subscribe for more, and let your voice be heard.